Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Panasonic Lumix S5 IIX. The S5 IIX is pretty much an S5 II with additional advanced video features. Panasonic has been a pioneer of video-centric DSLMs ever since the GH1. The S5 IIX is a bit different take on high-end video-centric DSLM. It is Panasonic's attempt to offer very advanced video features in a sensible but at the same time complete and importantly budget-friendly package. In this video we will mainly take a look at those additional video features, differences between the regular S5 II and the X version, and I will try to evaluate overall performance of the S5 IIX. The form factor of the S5 IIX is basically identical to the non-X S5 II. The only difference visible on the outside is the black Lumix logo and S5 IIX marking. I personally like this black on black design. It has a bit of sinister look to it and it is a pretty creative way to differentiate the X version. It is not the smallest or the lightest full-frame DSLM, but it is very compact by standards of capable full-frame video cameras. It is about 13.5 cm wide and it weighs 657 grams without the battery, but those figures include a very sophisticated cooling system, which is a very important part of the S5 IIX. Much like the base S5 II, it is a very well-made camera with full magnesium frame and rubberized surface. S5 IIX also uses the same 24 megapixel full-frame backside illuminated sensor as the base S5 II. Here I will mainly go over the characteristics of this sensor related to video. 24 megapixel resolution allows the S5 IIX to shoot 6K video, which it indeed does, including OpenGate 3x2 6K. Full sensor readout speed seems to be somewhere around 40 frames per second, which means that 4K 60p comes with 1.5 times crop, but we will get to that in a minute. The rolling shutter is slightly better than average for a full-frame hybrid camera at this price point. There is some amount, but it definitely won't ruin your footage in reasonable situations. The ISO performance is identical to pretty much every other backside illuminated full-frame sensor released after 2018. As usually, you will get very clean images up to ISO 3200. ISO 6400 is usable in most situations, ISO 12800 is more of an emergency option, and ISO 25600 is useful mostly for documentation purposes. The video specifications are probably the biggest highlight of the S5 IIX, so let's talk about that. It can shoot 6K and fully downsampled 4K video up to 30p with no crop in 16:9 or 17:9 aspect ratio. It can also shoot OpenGate 6K video in 3:2 aspect ratio. The amount of detail is identical to the S5 II and therefore great. There is no low-pass filter on the sensor, which means that it captures a bit more detail than other cameras with 24 megapixel full-frame sensor. Fortunately, I haven't really noticed any major issues with artifacts or aliasing so far. Both 4K and 6K capture great amount of detail, so no complaints there. The biggest difference between the S5 II and the S5 IIX are the codecs. The S5 II is limited to long GOP at 150 megabits per second for 4K and 200 megabits per second for 6K. The S5 II adds all intra codecs, internal ProRes recording, and external RAW output. All intra codecs go up to 400 megabits per second for 4K 24 or 25p and 800 megabits per second for 4K 50 and 60p. To be honest, long GOP codecs are pretty great nowadays, so you will have to look for the differences between all intra and long GOP. You will mostly find them in scenes with a lot of movement such as flowing water. All intra is still a great option to have for advanced projects and workflow options as it is easier to work with. 6K is still limited to long GOP and 10-bit 420. It is not a big deal in my opinion, but I know that there are some people out there who won't even touch 420 footage for some reason. ProRes recording, in my opinion, opens the door into serious filmmaking for the S5 IIX. ProRes recording goes up to 1.6 gigabits per second in 5.8K 25p ProRes HQ422. That is very serious footage. When you combine it with the V-Log, you will get excellent footage that offers ample flexibility for post-production. Low compression ProRes provides a ton of information for expanding the log gamma curve, so it is a joy to work with this kind of output. 4K 25p ProRes is available up to 422HQ in relatively manageable 811 megabits per second. 4K 50 and 60p is available but only with 1.5 times or APS-C crop, much like with the non-X S5 II. Unlike the recording area, 4K 60p codecs are definitely not compromised. You can shoot 4K 50 or 60p in all-intra 10-bit 422 up to 800 megabits per second. You can also shoot 4K 50 or 60p in ProRes 422HQ up to 1.6 gigabits per second. The footage and the files are in my opinion very solid despite the crop. Another difference between the X and non-X S5 II is that the X can record straight into SSD through USB-C. You will need to use SSD recording for 4K 60p all-intra 800 megabits per second and for ProRes. Everything else can be recorded on V90 SD cards. SSD recording is a great feature. You can get a 1TB SanDisk Extreme Pro SSD for the price of a 64GB V90 SD card. An obvious disadvantage is that you will have something hanging out of the camera, but we will get to that later. A big part of the overall video capabilities of the S5 IIX is the smart cooling system located in the viewfinder housing. I still haven't heard a fan in the real-world situations, only when I put it close to a radiator, and even then it ran very quietly. I can say that the S5 II and the X are probably the most overheating resistant cameras in the category. Unfortunately, this video will not cover external RAW capabilities. I will show you that in another video later on. Overall, the S5 IIX is an excellent camera for advanced filmmaking. It shoots very detailed video with excellent codecs. There is not much more that I can ask for in this regard. The S5 IIX is pretty much marketed as a video camera in DSLM body, but it still competes with mainstream hybrid cameras. Fortunately, it can take very nice stills. The S5 IIX doesn't really sacrifice anything in terms of the stills, which is a difference in comparison to the A7S III philosophy, for example. The stills capabilities of the S5 IIX are identical to the non-X version. It takes very detailed 24 megapixel photos. The RAWs are great and it captures plenty of dynamic range, much like other full-frame cameras with 24 megapixel BSI sensor. The only weakness is 7 frames per second continuous shooting with mechanical shutter, but that is largely offset by 30 frames per second mode with electronic shutter. As I've explained in my S5 II review, it has two outstanding features for stills photography. Those are the 96 megapixel pixel shift mode and a huge buffer that can take 200 RAWs despite that it only uses SD cards. If you would like to learn more about the stills capabilities of the S5 IIX, take a look at my 4 months with S5 II video, which will be linked in the description. The autofocus system seems to be identical to the S5 II with firmware 1.1. That means that it is great. I have tested it in a lot of situations with various lenses and I still wasn't able to fool it. It works great even in the most difficult scenes, such as this one with the SD card. The tracking works great as well, the subject detection is very accurate and the focus transitions are very smooth. Panasonic offers a ton of options to customize the speed and the response of the AF in video. Default settings work great for me, so I haven't really played with those outside of the testing. Unless there is something seriously wrong with the settings, there shouldn't be any issues with the autofocus in video. I have tested the autofocus with Sigma lenses on the S5 II and the performance was pretty much the same as with the first-party Panasonic lenses. The lag in the stills autofocus on the base S5 II has been completely fixed. The focus acquisition is now pretty much instant and among the fastest on the market. It is 100% accurate and it works great in low light and low contrast situations, so no complaints. Again, if you want to learn more about the stills autofocus, take a look at my 4 months with S5 II video. Overall, I am very happy with the autofocus system. Going with the face detection was a big step for Panasonic and it was definitely a correct decision. Unsurprisingly, the in-body image stabilization unit is carried over from the S5 II and so is the performance. Despite the 5 EV rating, it is one of the best stabilization systems on the market. It works great in any kind of reasonable situations, such as static shots, panning, or pointing the camera around. A specialty of this system is walking. As I've explained before, it trades effectiveness at longer focal lengths for warping at ultra-wide focal lengths when walking. If you want to walk with a 24mm or longer focal length, look no further. The performance of this IBIS system on a gimbal is incredible. The S5 II IBIS pretty much neutralizes up and down movements when walking. The in-body image stabilization in this camera basically makes everybody a ninja walk expert. I will talk more about that in my upcoming gimbal reviews, but the S5 II IBIS is quite a breakthrough for gimbal use, and that is a huge strength of this system. Overall, the in-body image stabilization is excellent. I have some new thoughts about the handling. The only physical difference between the S5 II and the S5 IIX is that the markings on the X version are dark gray. I have to say that they are more difficult to see in low light conditions. It looks really great though, so I'm inclined to say that it is probably worth it. My second remark concerns the use of SSD. You have a couple of options to mount it, most of which include a cage. My favorite solution to mount it is on the top of the cage using a small rig SSD holder. If I'm using an external monitor, a good option is to mount the SSD on the left side in front of the port doors. I would say that this small rig BSH2343 SSD holder is probably a must-have accessory for the S5 IIX. I have mostly been using the S5 IIX with a small rig Black Mamba cage. It has a beautiful surface finish that matches the all-black theme of the S5 IIX. It wraps around the camera very nicely, so it is not too bulky and you can still use the grip on the camera with the cage attached. All of the usual small rig features, such as integrated Arca plate, RE-style mount, cold shoe, and so on, are available as expected. This is a great cage overall. The controls are generally great. Everything is logically positioned, there are 3 command dials, plenty of customizable buttons, and so on. Also worth mentioning is a dedicated dry mode dial and focus mode switch with focus area button. Once again, I think that it would be nice to have fully separated stills and video modes, but I can live without it. The display uses a 1.84 million 3-inch panel, and it is one of the best displays in the category. It is sufficiently detailed and bright, so it should be good enough for filming without an external display. The electronic viewfinders uses a classic 3.69 million panel, which is still completely fine to use, but there are more impressive viewfinders out there. There is also one user interface feature that I will mention here, and that is the option to create your own selection of recording quality settings. The S5 II offers a ton of codec, resolution, and frame rate combinations, so having an option to only see those that you will personally use will make the orientation much easier. The battery life is actually pretty good, considering the video output and power-hungry features of the S5 IIX. It is a bit difficult to measure because it only shows bars instead of battery percentage. It only consumed 2 bars, or about 40% of the battery, during my usual half-day long samples gathering, which is a very good result. I will probably make a full comparison with the A7 IV later, because the fixed stills autofocus and additional video capabilities alter the conclusion of my original A7 IV and S5 II comparison quite significantly. The S5 IIX is definitely a more advanced video camera and possibly the biggest A7 competitor at the moment. To sum up, Panasonic S5 II opens the door into the world of serious filmmaking for the S5 II line. It retains all of the strengths of the S5 II, such as the improved face detection autofocus system, very solid video and stills quality, effective in-body image stabilization, and so on. It is still a very capable hybrid camera that competes with A7 and R6 lines. The possibility to shoot all intra, ProRes, and RAW in combination with clever design of the cooling system make the S5 II a very compelling choice for filmmakers who are looking for an all-round capable workhorse camera. There isn't really much that I can complain about. I would still like to have stills/video switch. I also miss the CF Express slot a bit. SSD recording is great, but having a CF Express option would be nice. My biggest personal complaint is that there is no high-resolution S5R to pair with the S5 IIX. I hope that it will change one day. Last but not least, the price to performance ratio is pretty incredible. There isn't really any full-frame camera in this price category that comes close to the video capabilities of the S5 IIX. Overall, I can highly recommend the S5 IIX to filmmakers, content creators, and hybrid users looking for a very capable hybrid device with advanced video capabilities. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.